Today, we are going to go over the causes, consequences, and conflicts of the Cold War. Also, whether or not those conflicts were related to the war. The conflicts I'm going to talk about are youth rebellion, cultural rejection of mainstream mores, and gender equality. Here are some of the causes of the Cold War. It was caused by a face-off between the US and Soviet Union. The Soviet Union feared an attack from America and wanted to spread communism. Also, there was a conflict between their economic organizations, which were democracy in the US and communism in the Soviet Union. Now, let's talk about the consequences of the Cold War. There was growing fear of nuclear weapons. Also, President Truman implemented his Truman Loyalty Program. His intent was to protect Americans from communist influence. However, his executive order added to the hysteria and became a witch hunt where people began to accuse others of being a communist. There are conflicts during wartime that are related to the war. These conflicts can be viewed through the culture of a society. One of these conflicts is the youth rebellion. I'm going to talk about the rebellion by referring to the Beat Generation. They were mostly white teens who felt like something was missing from their culture's music, so they turned to music from black culture because it was upbeat and lively. In Time magazine, the author of The Ganser Syndrome tries to explain why young children have their jukeboxes and fight in the streets. In this way, they rebelled against societal norms. This is related to the war because they brought a sense of energy and fun during a rather dark period of history. Another thing to note is that the baby boomers were relatively well off and therefore wanted to do what they pleased. They wanted their voices to be heard, so they rebelled. The youth put words into actions and therefore fostered the beginning of a new society. Another conflict during the war was the cultural rejection of mainstream mores. This is not related to war, but it is more so related to the culture of the society at the time. An example of the cultural rejection of mainstream mores is Elvis Presley and those who listened to him. Elvis was a white man but sounded black. In his performance of Hound Dog on the Milton Berle show, his dancing and singing are seen as those of the black performer. White people who listened to him rejected mainstream mores because it was quote-unquote race music, and the generation before them would never have listened or associated themselves with that music. The final conflict I'm going to talk about today is gender equality. This was a prominent issue and is definitely related to the war. According to the Oxford Handbook of the Cold War, the US and Soviet Union measured their progress with women's status in their nations. The US made progress by establishing the norm of a domestic life for women, whereas the Soviet Union worked for gender equality, like equal pay between men and women. The US pushed for women to be obedient and stay at home, which were the qualities of the Victorian era, but that only made them gather and fight for their rights. Another example of gender equality is the episode of I Love Lucy, when Lucy auditions for a commercial. She wants to be a spokesperson for Vita Vegemin. However, Ricky tries to stop her and says that she should not be doing this. Clearly, he feels superior over her and does not want her in a role in the entertainment industry, because it was not common for women to do that at the time. Lucy is startled and pleads with Ricky to let her do the commercial. Finally, she shows off her skills with the aid of the director and is able to do the commercial. This episode shows women had to fight hard for gender equality due to the Victorian values instilled in American culture. So, to sum up, the tension between the US and Soviet Union caused the Civil War. There were consequences like fear of nuclear weapons and accusations of communism due to the Truman Loyalty Program. The conflicts during wartime that were related to the war were the youth rebellion and gender equality. The cultural rejection of mainstream mores was not related to the war, but to the American culture. Thank you for listening. I hope you learned more about the Cold War with this podcast.